Hi, my name is Jillian Eberson, and today my group and I are going to be discussing Alzheimer's disease. So, we're going to start off with a brief introduction and just some fast facts about what Alzheimer's disease actually is. So, to begin, what causes the disease? So, Alzheimer's appears to arrive from a lot of changes in the brain that may occur over either a short span of time or a very long period of time. Scientists also believe that genetic, environmental, and lifestyle factors combined may lead to Alzheimer's disease, and this information comes from the National Institute on Aging in 2019. The brain of someone who has the disease has plaque that is formed when the protein amyloid beta builds up in the brain. In healthy people, this protein is swept away, but in Alzheimer's, it builds up like garbage and just accumulates over time. Additionally, there will be tangles of neurofibrillary and tau in the brain that result in the loss of strong connections in the neurons. And because of these tangles and the lack of strong connections, a person struggles to remember things and think as well as they typically do. Currently, this only affects humans. It does not affect any other species. And it was first documented in 1906 by Dr. Alois Alzheimer's. His patient, Augusta D., experienced memory loss, paranoia, psychological changes, as well as a shrinkage in and around the nerve cells of her brain, according to Alzheimer's.net from an article in 2013. Dr. Alzheimer began following Augusta in 1901 when, according to the National Institute of Health, her husband came in describing the following symptoms. In March 1901, the husband of the 50-year-old woman had noticed an untreatable paranoid symptomatology in his wife, and then, in fast progression and with increasing intensity, sleep disorders, disturbances of memory, aggressiveness, crying, and progressive confusion. So these are some of the early symptoms of the disease when it was first discovered. So, speaking of the initial discovery, what were the historical hypotheses about the disease? The main historical hypothesis about the disease was that it was caused by a sticky brain plaque. This was proved to be incorrect when drugs that reduced plaque around the brain were not effective in combating Alzheimer's disease.
The first form of treatment for Alzheimer's came in the 1970s. Experimental drugs were being tested. One class of these experimental medication, the cholinesterase inhibitors, were approved by the FDA and remains in common use today. Donepezil, rifstigmine, and galantamine are examples of cholinesterase inhibitors. We still don't know the true cause of Alzheimer's disease, but we have theories of what it could be. The search for Alzheimer's disease causes began with Dr. Alzheimer and continues today in full force. In the late 1970s, researchers described a cholinergic hypothesis of Alzheimer's disease. This theory attributed Alzheimer's disease symptoms to a deficit of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, a small chemical messenger that is essential for proper memory function. And modern treatments for mild Alzheimer's cases are to use inhibitors that are prescribed for mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. These drugs may help reduce symptoms and help control some behavioral symptoms. The medications are Razidine, Exelon, Aricept, and some modern treatments for severe cases of Alzheimer's are Namenda, Nimethyl D-aspartate, and it is prescribed to treat, and all these are prescribed to treat severe Alzheimer's disease, along with some moderate cases. This drug's main effect to decrease is to decrease the symptoms, which would allow to maintain daily functions a little longer than they would without the medication. And our group was interested in this disease because it has affected some of our lives personally, and we wanted to research why the disease affects so many people.
Okay, so the first symptoms of Alzheimer's disease vary from person to person. For many, it's a decline in non-memory aspects of the brain, such as word finding, visual issues, and impaired reasoning or judgment. More later symptoms of Alzheimer's disease may include being forgetful of events or personal history, feeling moody or withdrawn, especially in social or mentally challenging situations, being able to recall information about themselves, like their address or their telephone number, or the high school and college they attended to, experiencing confusion about where they are and what day it is, having trouble controlling their bladder and bowels, experiencing changes in sleep patterns, such as sleeping during the day and becoming restless at night, showing increased tendency to wander and become lost, and demonstrating personality and behavioral changes, including suspiciousness and delusions. So what organ does it affect, and what does the disease do to that body part? Alzheimer's disease is an irreversible progressive brain disorder. It usually happens over time. It really don't happen overnight. This disease typically destroys the neurons and their connections in parts of the brain involved in memory, including the cortex and hippocampus. And it later affects the areas in the cerebral cortex responsible for language, reasoning, and social behavior. Eventually, many other areas of the brain are damaged. Over time, a person with Alzheimer's gradually loses his or her ability to live and function independently. Ultimately, the disease is fatal. What are the other organ systems that are affected? And this is also the reason why it's fatal. Although Alzheimer's primarily attacks to brain memory functions such as the hippocampus and other parts of the brain, the major thing that is doing is destroying the neurons the brain have developed. As we learned in class, when these neurons are being destroyed, it is stopping the neurons' chemical and electrical message pathways to other neurons, which results in the brain being unable to effectively send messages to other parts of the body's muscles and organ system. When these neurons are unable to send messages to the organ system and muscle system, it can result in organ failure, depending on the severity, and lead to death. For this reason, people are more likely to die from the disease.
Nearly 5 million of us Americans were living with the disease, while unfortunately this number is supposed to triple by the year 2060, which is quite a scary number considering that's only 40 years away. Alzheimer's disease and its effect on the world. As for the worldwide effect of Alzheimer's disease, there is an estimated 44 million people who are living with Alzheimer's disease across the globe. This is according to a study that I found about Alzheimer's disease. The impact of life. So, due to the nature of Alzheimer's, the person will be afflicted, or person who would be afflicted would have trouble doing daily tasks, issues with remembering like a person's name, or the person might have issues remembering where they placed items, like paying bills, or as well as give them poor judgment and maybe mood swings, because it just affects the brain so severely sometimes that they might even, to some people, to observers, seem like a completely different person than they remember them to be. The age range. So those who are more at risk for Alzheimer's disease would be those who are between the ages of 60 and 80 years old. There are cases where people younger than this have gotten the disease, but the likelihood of getting it younger than the above range is much smaller. So there's almost no worry. Unless there's a family history of Alzheimer's disease, one shouldn't have to worry that much until they get about to the above age range. Older people are affected due to the age, simply, of their brain. Because of how old their brain is, it means that the brain has been working longer, and because of this, the deterioration of their brain is much more severe than it would be for, let's say, a 20-year-old. Its functioning, this aging deteriorates the functioning ability of the brain, thus allowing for higher probability of someone getting the disease.